All right. Good morning to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning also to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. As you will know, every Sunday we try to do a breakdown of the Disney Plus series known only as The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. As always, we will also have a guest host joining us to be able to break down and analyze the episode. But to start, of course, we want to hop into some Sparknotes just to recap everything. So it goes without saying, if you have not seen, episode 5 of Falcon and Winter Soldier, there will be tons of spoilers. So you have been warned. All right. So with all that out of the way, just a couple of minutes just to remind you guys, make sure, if you enjoy a lot of these breakdowns and analysis that we have, make sure, of course, that you like and subscribe to the show. Of course, hit that thumbs up button. It helps us out a great deal. And also hit that subscribe button down below that you see. Additionally, of course, you can find us on Twitter at Move and Shake UNLTD. And of course, on Instagram at Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And for any of the conversation that we have today, as well as perhaps some, further thoughts that you guys have, even long after this live stream is done, just know that you can find us on that hashtag Falcon Winter Soldier M&SU. All right. Okay. So with those minutes out of the way, let's hop, as I said, right into some Spark Notes, giving you just a quick recap of episode 4 and then hopping right into episode 5. All right. So just to recap what we had in episode 4, we basically had Io. We left off with Io and Winter Soldier, as in essence, just having a standoff regarding Zemo being freed. And before we hop into their conversation about that circumstance, we are given a flashback of Io, without us even being aware of it, acting as a catalyst to Bucky's deprogramming. She gives him an 8-hour window when we flash back to the present, an 8-hour window to return Zemo to prison. The GRC tightens their grip on borders due to the Flag Smashers' act of terrorism that we saw in episode 3. Team Falcon tracks down Carly, so the Flag Smasher leader, to talk her down, but they, of course, get interrupted by Team Walker. And in the ensuing skirmish, Walker gets his hands on the superhero serum. He doesn't take it, mind you, but he gets his hands on it. Team Falcon tries to regroup, but are once again interrupted by Team Walker. But we also have the third party of the Dora Milaje, who basically lay waste to both teams, causing Zemo in the chaos to get away. The Flag Smashers set a trap for Team Walker. And as a result, when we had that instance of Walker and Battlestar hopping into, that trap, so to speak, there's an implication that Walker has indeed taken the serum based on a fight that we're observing with one of the henchmen. The fight, or say that three-way fight that we have between Team Walker and Team Falcon, as well as the Flag Smashers, results in the death of Battlestar. And in retaliation, we close with Walker murdering one of the Flag Smashers to horrified onlookers. And we, of course, have that horrific image of Cap's shield being plastered with blood, which is, in complete contrast to what we are accustomed to when we see that symbol. So hopping into episode 5, it picks up right where Walker is trying to recollect himself after that moment that we have at the end of episode 4. Team Wilson, and guys, you have to mind me. So when I'm Team Wilson, just trying to shorten, giving you an idea of the parties involved. But yes, Team Wilson confronts him. A fight ensues, and it results in them Team Wilson, that is, being able to get their the shield back. Team Wilson catches up with Torres, who we have not seen for a couple of episodes. And Torres, I feel like that character has the unfortunate burden of providing much of the exposition. So in the same way that he's done in prior episodes, he provides exposition here of the current status of things, the implications of Walker, his actions of murdering the Flag Smasher. Not necessarily, I don't think it's the Flag Smasher, the actual act of doing it, but more so publicly being seen doing it, which we will get into. And then the government stepping in to take over the situation of, taking jurisdiction. So Walker is stripped of his rank and benefit, his identity, entered this mysterious figure named Val, who we will also get into in one segment that we have about Easter eggs and callbacks. I just want to be able to move forward just with the summary first. Flag Smashers, the leader escalates things further in retaliation for what happened to, that henchman that bit the bullet. Bucky finds Zemo, and Zemo tries to convince him to, go after Carly because he feels that she is completely fanaticized now and needs to be stopped. And the only way to de-escalate things is to take her out of the equation. However, we do have a nice moment with Bucky where he demonstrates that he's no longer under anyone's control, and demonstrates this in a scene that many of you have probably seen in the promotional materials with the, the gun and the bullets. And we find out that he actually, in finding Zemo, also brought the Dora Milaje with them, who are able to apprehend him. We find out that they're sending him back to the raft, which has other implications, which of course we will get into. Sam checks back in with, before that, Bucky asks a favor of Io, based on an incident that happened within the fight, to replace some gear for Sam that he's going to need later. Let's see, Sam checks back in with Isaiah, who we remember in a couple of episodes ago was the Black Captain America from long ago. We have a nice moment with his grandson where they kind of have a little bit of friction, him and Sam, because it seems like, I guess you can say that the grandson acts kind of as like a guardian for his grandfather. We get more detail from Isaiah about the superhero, so say the super soldier serum, and what happened at that time, and why he's so bitter about, that time he spent in the military and having that super soldier serum. Sam regroups back home, of course, after being benched after that incident with John Walker. Walker, in contrast, visits Lamar's family, his the friend who was killed. Sharon, we see a moment where she is in contact with the Leaper that we remember at the top of the episode, that prior antagonist from Winter Soldier, who has resurfaced in this series. Sam and Bucky have a heart-to-heart with the Shield, which is kind of interesting. It has this cool, interesting dynamic of what you perhaps would see with like, two friends perhaps catching like a ball, but except in this moment, it's a Shield. Sam gets a hilarious, well, not hilarious. I love the montage, mind you, but I'll just say that he gets a Rocky training montage practicing with the Shield, so to speak. And the Flag Smashers, in that plan to escalate things further, they activate some of their sleepers. They pair with the Leaper to help take down the GRC, and to also deal with Wilson. And the Flag Smashers, by the end of the episode, confront the GRC, and we close with Wilson opening a box that contains the wings, or it's implied that is the wings that he will, have going into our final episode. So much has happened. I know there might be a couple of things here and there that I might have missed, but as I said, these are the Spark Notes. So with that out of the way, I want to hop into introducing the guest hosts that I have today. Guest hosts I have, good friend of mine. They provide, they are a director, an actor. They have been earned, I should say, many awards, not just for their acting talents with the short known as the recursion theorem. They also received an acting on camera award with the TIVA DC Peer Awards. They can currently be seen in the in the indie horror comedy known as A Comedy of Errors. So let me introduce Dan Franko. Let me bring him on. See, here we go. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good. First off, I hope everything is well. And before we really hop into the nitty gritty, so to speak, of this episode, what are your general impressions of episode 5? I know it's loaded.
I love this. I love the series. I love everything that Marvel is doing with the TV aspect. I think one of the things that bugged me about the Netflix TV series was that it didn't feel connected to the MCU, and these are clearly directly driven and directly taken from the MCU. I thought this one was kind of from episode 1 through episode 4. This show has just been straight out of the gate, just all in. And so this one took a minute to kind of catch a breath. You had the whole thing with Sam's family and bringing the community together to build the boat, and kind of him finding his even keel before the next phase of what he's going to do. And I thought it was I didn't realize until you just said it that we're heading into the finale. I thought we had 8. I didn't realize we had 6. So that really bummed me out just now. But it feels like just like that episode just prior to the Battle of Winterfell, the one where everyone's just kind of waiting, the calm before the storm. And I feel like that's what this episode was.
Definitely. Just to give you a rundown, Dan, normally the way we do this, we have our callbacks. We go into callbacks first, but after that, we dig a little deeper and we get into our psych evals. So that part of it, as actors, is pretty cool to dive into of what the psychology of many of these characters are. But first and foremost, as I said, callbacks and Easter eggs. There were quite a few of them in this episode. And I guess I'll start first with the standoff that we had in this episode between Walker, Bucky, and Sam, and it had a lot of callbacks to that major moment that we have in Civil War. Like, it immediately reminded me of that moment. And even, while even the dynamic was similar, where while it's not necessarily over the Accords in this case, it is over the legacy of Captain America. So it still deals with similar parties and a similar dynamic of two parties going against one, even though it's for a different reason. But I don't know, what were your thoughts on that? Or maybe there were some other callbacks that you recognize.
Oh, it's funny that, because I've, as the show's gone along, I've sort of been, because Civil War was so long ago.
Right, 2016. Yeah.
And you forget that Bucky and Falcon spent almost no time together after that. So the same place that they were after they fight Spider-Man, and he's like, "I hate you,"
Right.
That's where their relationship is when this show starts. And I didn't think about that, because I thought, whoa, they both blipped out. They both, so they've not spent. So they're really picking up their relationship from there. And so it does feel like in that moment it was very much like Steve and Bucky fighting Tony. And it was a lot of the composition of the shots were very similar too, and the sword and the shield interplay going back and forth. So yeah, I totally agree that had a lot of that inspiration from that other fight.
Definitely. And then I was going to say a couple of other ones that came to mind, and I guess technically this is more of like a symbolism thing, but I would hold it as an Easter egg. Is I didn't really go into it in the summary, but that moment that we have John Walker rip the wings from Sam in that fight, it basically, up to this point, Sam is really, and I guess it kind of can jump into psychology, but whatever, is in essence ripping away his identity as Falcon and him having to take on, or him having to finally come to terms with taking on that new persona as Captain America. Okay, you don't want to be Captain America? Guess what? You're gonna be Captain America. I'm gonna rip away that identity that you have with your wings of that symbolism of you being Falcon. And even in that moment, kind of to jump further into that is the result of what happens later. What we have with Torres, of him, Sam just basically saying, you know what, I don't care about the wings, just take them, and Torres takes them on, because we know down the line, like I don't, have you read for that? So
no,
okay, so I tell you what, I will hold this off. I will just say Torres has a fate with being a superhero. That's all I will say.
So I haven't read the comics, and I don't know. I almost was having this sort of, can I trust Torres? Is he really part of the Flag Smashers, or there's almost sort of a, I don't know. So there's something about him, or the way the guy's playing him, that I wasn't quite trusting. But then when he kept the wings, I thought maybe he's going to be the Falcon to Sam's Cap.
Right. So we have, like I said, we have that element there, which is a cool nod. And then we have, which it's funny. It wasn't even purposeful that I brought you on this week, but the fact that Dreyfus was made a cameo. So for those of you out there, Dan was in the series of Veep. So like I promise you, this was not purposeful. This was a complete coincidence that it just came to me just now. I was like, wait a second, like that whole connection. But her being able to step in, as Valentina Allegra Dia Fontaine, which for comic book readers out there, it is a deep cut, but she is known as Madam Hydra. So like she does have implications in terms of what they may do with her down the line. But with that being said, just with that, connection alone, can you talk to that, and, having her, pop up in the MCU?
That was really cool. And I had no idea that was coming. And so that means that I'm now officially 1 degree from the MCU.
There you go.
I have friends who I've worked with that are in the MCU as stunt people. Gary Peebles from The Night Watchman that we did here locally. He is Drax's stunt double in Infinity War and Endgame. But I didn't share camera with Gary. I never overlapped with him actually in a scene. So now I'm in a scene with somebody from the. I'm already geeked that I'm in a scene with Julia Louis-Dreyfus at all. But now that connects me to the MCU.
There you go.
It's so cool. Because that's something they do really well is folding comedy in, and but she's a phenomenal actress in general. I mean, she's like the Gretzky of acting of our time. She's just won all the 3 different characters, all the Emmys, all the SAG Awards, all the Golden Globes. I can't wait to see where they take that character and what she brings to it. Because it's going to be, it's going to be funny, but it's also, she's just so good. And so it's neat to have her in this.
For sure. And then I was going to say the other element before we hop into, dive deep into Psych Evals is, so as Isaiah, when we were kind of alluded to it in prior episodes of where his bitterness stems from, of being provided with the super soldier serum. But we get even further detail as to why that is. And, he even touches on, historical things that are real, even though a lot of, the Marvel is heightened of talking about, red tails and that type of thing, and connecting it to, real life events, which is one thing that I've always liked about just Marvel in general is cool that, and if I recall correctly, you guys can correct me there in the comments, but if I remember correctly, he actually, Stan Lee has been quoted as saying that Marvel is very much about looking outside your window and seeing, you know, the real world to a degree, the real world as real as it can be. Even though, you know, you have gods and wizards and all these various, you know, larger than life characters, they still have everyday problems, and it still connects to a lot of real life events. They figure out ways in those arcs to connect it to real life events. But yeah, your thoughts on that, on just that general idea or the aesthetic that you have with Marvel?
Well, I think that's, for me, the thing that's always, at least from the movies, again, I'm not as I haven't followed the comic books that closely, but in the movies especially, the characters are, from Marvel more so than DC for me, are ordinary people who are having to adjust to these changes in their life. Spider-Man gets the powers. Iron Man becomes, changes of heart and becomes Iron Man. They evolve. They have to learn to be extraordinary in an ordinary world. And whereas a lot of times Superman just was born that way, and Wonder Woman was born that way, and the world almost has to adjust to them. So yeah, I think it's definitely, it grounds, I think, the Marvel characters a lot more than some of the DC counterparts.
Definitely. And with that being said, I know I touched on it a little bit to a degree with Sam, but we're gonna really double down on Psych Evals. So a couple of characters that, and I know we were talking about Val a little earlier. So I guess the big ones that came to mind in this episode was obviously John Walker, Sam, and even Bucky, and to a lesser extent, even Val to a degree as well. Unless and if there are other characters that you recall from the episode that come to mind for you that you found like interesting in terms of, you know, what's going on with them, you know, feel free, Dan. But I was going to say to hit the ground running with John, the thing that has been interesting this whole time, and we always knew that there was going to be a moment where he had a fall. So in this moment of having a fall, at least up to this episode, you know, and having other folks on the show, we've, you know, constantly discussed that idea of, and I brought it up and we've discussed it further, is that idea of Walker always being accustomed to having things go his way, and also always being awarded for, you know, his efforts. And you know what happens when you finally take that L and you have to, you know, deal with the implications of that. You know, how does a person deal with that that's so accustomed to winning all the time? Like, that might be a scary thing, that, you know, someone who's accustomed to winning all the time finally, you know, isn't winning, and how do they come to terms with that, or how do they deal with that? And then another element of that, and I'll give a hat tip to one of the guests that I had last week with discussing, and it was with Tom's comic creator, Tom Zoller. He had mentioned just that idea too of thinking of someone who feels very, you know, entitled, and is dealing with a lot of like trauma, like more than likely dealing with PTSD from his time in the military prior to being coordinated as Captain America, and him dealing with that prior grief and trauma. And the only reason why I bring with that is it was fascinating, like in the beginning of the episode, where he was really dealing with losing his friend, and he had a moment where he was just like really grieving, and then he just snapped out of it and said, okay, time to go back to work. And it was just like immediate thing, like time to go back to work. And as soon as he saw Wilson and Bucky, he was like, oh, you guys don't look so well. You know, maybe you guys should see someone, and maybe I can, you know, take things from here. So like, it's kind of like a situation where he's very much projecting his issues onto others, where it's like, oh, you don't look very well. You don't seem very well. Maybe you go see a doctor. I'm like, dude, like, you need to go see a doctor. Like, you need to check yourself out. And thinking of that, and how meaty, you know, a role like that could be, and thinking of those elements, you know, share.
Well, I think they did a really good job of the first 4 episodes of establishing Lamar as his sort of tether. He sort of,
Yes,
whereas
his
he wasn't
conscience.
sure he could take on the mantle. He was talking about, I think he's the guy that's always either kept him in check or kept him sort of on the right track. And without that tether, he spiraled off and completely, lost his mind. And you mentioned that shot at the beginning, but how amazing was that shot when he stands up,
Yeah,
the low angle with the bloody shield? That was
yeah,
just incredible. I think Wyatt Russell is doing a phenomenal job with his character. I know people
yeah.
are hating on him left and right, but I think he is giving it
That's
exactly
why
what it
he's
needs.
doing such a good job.
Yeah.
Because we hate him so.
And the first moment that he stepped on camera with the helmet on when they introduced the new Captain America,
Ugh.
swear to God, at the initial second, I thought, is that Joffrey? He looked like Joffrey with that little like weaselly face in the mask. And the funny thing is, just a real quick sidebar.
Yeah.
Wyatt Russell, I saw him play hockey for the Capitals. He was a hockey goalie, and I guess he got an invite to the Caps development camp when he was in the juniors or in college. So I saw him at Piney Orchard in one of the Caps developmental camps, which is kind of cool. The shield is sort of like a goalie blocker, so it's sort of a neat thing there. But no, I think he's great. I think he's done exactly what the role has needed it to be. Because he's really just an obstacle that makes Sam have to realize that he is worthy, that he does need to take up the mantle, and that and just they go back and forth, Sam and Bucky, just that Cap was right about. And I love the thing about with you talk about Psych Eval that with Sebastian Stan, and he said if Cap was wrong about you, what if he was wrong about me?
About me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say to take it a step further that I found interesting of talking about PTSD, because we have another character there right there in the fight with him that is dealing with so much of that, and that's with Bucky. And what I found very interesting with this episode is just that idea of mirroring what's happening with John Walker and what's happening with Bucky, because towards the end of the episode, we had that moment I was talking about, almost like throwing a football or playing catch or something, exactly, like with the baseball, in essence, with the shield, and talking about just that idea of and Sam brings this up, is just that idea of finding value externally from others versus intrinsically having that value of yourself, because so much of Walker's identity is so much entwined into being a soldier. So like you take that away from him, he kind of loses himself and is like, okay, now what? Like, he even says it himself, like, you built me, like this is all that I know. I'm a soldier. So what am I supposed to do now? And just that idea of that, and how, Interval, finds him at his lowest point and is able to kind of, in essence, dig her claws into him in terms of potentially manipulating him and using him down the line, because she tells him everything that he wants to hear, like, everything that he believes that he did or believes that he did correctly. She reinforces that. So, of course, he may very well side with her because she is, in his corner, so he thinks. So with that being said, can you also talk about what are your thoughts on that dynamic, or maybe it was something else that you saw? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's right. Well, like, just as you were talking about it, you said she's Lady Hydra or something. Like, it almost is like John goes from being the new Cap to being the Hydra super soldier, which means he's the new Winter Soldier. So it's
I'll get into that too, but yes, go ahead.
So he kind of is still filling the shoes of people who aren't him. But I thought that you mentioned earlier that scene with Io and and Bucky, where she's reading she's saying the trigger words to him. That was phenomenal. I mean, they even joke about it earlier in the series that all Bucky does is stare quietly and stare ominously and stare. You know, he's staring again and brooding again. And so that was something that was just, you know, that was for Sebastian Stan. That was just an amazing little piece. It's such a simple and quiet thing, but the freedom that came from finally getting through those words and staying himself, and he just kind of breaks down. And I just thought that was a really beautiful moment in this show.
Oh
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was going to say, no, I definitely agree with you, you know, thinking of that flashback, because I believe that might have happened episode 4. Yeah. So yeah, like, you know, thinking of that moment was, yeah, like it in terms of just a acting scene between two folks, like, you know, that was definitely an incredible scene. And one thing, you know, stepping back into that, going back to, you know, what I was saying with mirroring, it is kind of seeing the contrast between how Walker was dealing with this trauma versus how Bucky was dealing with this trauma, because you could kind of argue that Bucky was kind of doing it the same, not explicitly, but in spirit, in terms of how he was dealing with this trauma. He was kind of what's the word? He was kind of skipping around dealing with the actual issue, which is what Sam actually addresses for him, which is why, like, yeah, you know, yeah, you're making amends, but you're not really making amends. Like, you have to actually confront it and actually say, you know, tell the person, you know, what it is, how you wrong them, versus kind of, you know, finding another alternative way to kind of weave around it. So,
you're trying to make yourself feel better instead of helping them and healing them.
Get closure, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, just that idea of doing, but kudos to Bucky, though, in that he actually, you know, understands that and is willing to go there, versus someone like Walker that is just going to basically say, well, you know, I was supposed to do this. Like they again, going back to that idea, I forgot the term that I used, but projecting, that's what it was. But you know, projecting those issues or not housing away those those emotions, which, as we've seen, can have, you know, pretty violent results if they aren't addressed properly. Because more than likely, after with what happened to his friend, I mean, while I feel that he did do that in a way based on what happened to his friend, one could argue that was probably just the ticking time bomb that was just from years and years of just housing away like all of this trauma from you know, prior missions that he's done, perhaps with the military, and then it finally, you know, exploded. You know, the tipping point obviously was the friend, you know, his friend dying, but you could argue that it wasn't necessarily just that event explicitly.
Well, and Stanley Tucci, way back in the original Captain America, says the serum enhances everything. It makes you more of who you are. And so
exactly.
that he took the serum and he's a person who, you know, he enjoyed killing that guy. You know, I think that was 100% part of that scene for him. He definitely, that wasn't just revenge. That wasn't just, he enjoyed being that wrath, you know, and taking that guy out.
Yeah, for sure. And switching gears to Bucky, I want to say probably the biggest turning point, which it was funny, but it wasn't funny, was at the beginning after the fight had concluded with him and Sam against Walker, of him just dropping the shield, like by Sam, like, see what happens when you didn't listen to me and didn't like, you know, take the shield from the get-go. This is what happens. But at the same time, what I like about the show is that, you know, yes, you're right, Bucky, but, you know, you don't finally get it, and you address it at the end. You don't finally get like the complications and all the other things at play that Sam is dealing with or coming to terms with, which is, I feel, what he decides to do for himself by the end of the episode, where he has two trips. He has a trip back to Isaiah, and he also he goes back home to, you know, address any issues there. So like, he does some soul searching himself, because like at that point of, and at least this is the way I interpret it, but you know, maybe it came across differently for you, but him going to Isaiah is, okay, like, I understand that I'm supposed to be Captain America. I was given the shield, but I really need to find out, you know, that whole idea, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So like, I need to go back and figure out what happened back then, and have a better understanding of what that was all about. So that way, perhaps I don't make that mistake or get into those same pitfalls that happen with that, and have a better appreciation for what others had to go through for the sake of, you know, this moniker. And then in the same way of going back home, perhaps, and even though his sister, you know, in but a few words, lets him know that it's okay to address maybe any resentment with, you know, family members back home about abandoning them and leaving them home, even though they understand that he is an Avenger and that he's saving the world. You know, that was something that I feel like we had in the first couple of episodes, where he was back home, and kind of that separation, or that kind of that disillusionment with his family, of abandoning them, so to speak. And yeah, you're back, but I mean, even when you were here, like, you weren't really around. So you know, what are your thoughts on that? I know it's loaded, but it's a lot of things that, you know, to chew into.
Well, I think you know, I think Marvel's done a good job of, at least up to this point, they've sort of addressed things going on in the world, but usually in a more abstract manner. And this particular show has taken a very, you know, it's filmed in Atlanta, where, you know, where they're passing laws that are causing film to leave Atlanta, you know, and it's really just saying, no, we're not gonna take that extra step away and make it abstract anymore. We're going to directly, just like you talked about it, open the window and talk about what's happening outside. And you know, we have a Black Captain America, and what is that in this country? In the 70s, clearly, you know, as he's coming back from Vietnam, I thought it was really with Isaiah, which I love Carl Lundby. He was great on Alias. He was,
and in Mantis, no one knows about that show, but Mantis, he was also another superhero. But yes,
in the late 90s. Okay, I remember
that was him.
Yeah.
That was
I didn't realize that was him. And I think, didn't he voice on the Black Panther cartoon? So he's already Marvel.
I believe so. Yeah, yeah. Let us know in the comments, guys. But I believe so. That sounds right. Yes.
But you know, here he basically had the exact same origin story, except he didn't volunteer. That was the difference. They just pushed it on him. But his unit got captured. He went single-handedly, brought them back, and Steve Rogers becomes this golden-haired hero idol, and he gets thrown in jail for 30 years because they don't know how to. And it's just such a, you know, and obviously his time was in Vietnam era, and you know, the civil rights movement was happening at the same time, and so he's very bitter and doesn't think that, you know, so that, and I think that was you know, like you said, it was important for Sam to go and get that and make his own choice and say, recognize that, but I'm now going to take up this mantle. And with that in mind, I'm not going to be Steve. I'm not going to be that version. I'm going to be my own version. And then I think I lost the other part of where we were going. Oh, and when we first meet Sam, he's running PTSD classes for soldiers. So that also is a big part of probably why he couldn't go home. You don't feel like you're the same person you were before, and you go back and it just doesn't feel right. And so that's probably another reason why he stayed away from home and stayed in DC and tried to help other soldiers. So
definitely, for sure. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it goes back to that Easter egg of just that, again, that dynamic, just like what you were saying, of that contrast of the path that Isaiah went versus Steve, where, he did something noble and got his guys back, and that it didn't turn out the same exact way, which was obviously unfortunate and horrible in terms of what happened after that, in terms of him being experimented on and that type of thing. So with that being said, I guess the other part of it too, well, no, you know what? No, we did address it. So just switching gears into what we had with theories and what ifs. Probably, other than Psych Evals, I love hopping into our theories of what we think might happen. But I know I've started each one. Are there any theories for you, Dan, that either you think that they're going to go that way, or you hope that they're going to go that way?
Well, the obvious one is that in the box is, I'm guessing, and I don't know from the comic, but so I don't know if Sam's version of Captain America still has the wings, but I would assume the suit is going to have that same kind of energy absorption, Black Panther, vibranium component as the Black Panther suit.
Definitely. So yeah, they don't really explicitly tell us what is in the box. I'm assuming, obviously one component of it, I'm assuming, would be the wings, but as you said, like, you could argue that it's the wings and perhaps a vibranium suit as well. So who knows? I just know that when I saw the way that they cut it, they did such a great job with that. And because the way that they cut it, I was like, no, don't stop right there. Like, I was so upset that they stopped it right at the episode, or should say right at that moment of him opening the box. I was like, it's like, y'all are really going to torture me with this one. But I get it, because you need that moment of the reveal in the next episode, which is good writing and good pacing, but still a bummer as the viewer to watch.
Yeah.
But another thing, and you brought it up earlier, and it kind of plays to something that I was thinking about up to this point. One thing that I had theorized with John Walker. So and just to give you kind of a Sparknotes version of Walker with the comics, if you haven't read it. I'm assuming you haven't, but he's had many monikers, and he's done for those of you out there, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I believe it's right. So he was Super Patriot at one time, and he actually got the serum at that time as Super Patriot, and then became at one point Captain America, and then became this new character called US Agent. So one thing that I have been theorizing, what we're talking about, is just how Marvel does a great job of trying to, I guess you can say, I don't like saying Ben and Jerrying their arcs, but mixing and meshing certain elements of different arcs and trying to weave it into a way that makes sense. Sometimes they have to weave it because, like, just in the context of a film, it works a lot better, or just to make things simpler for someone who, for folks that don't follow the comics, and just to make things simpler, of like not having to keep track of all these different elements and storylines. They try to simplify things. So with him, it felt like, even though he may not necessarily have gone the super patriot route, in essence, in spirit, he was super patriot based on all the awards and accolades that he received. He was a super patriot, and then he became Captain America. And my theory is that based on this delusionment, he's going to become U.S. agent. However, now that we've had the appearance of Val, Madam Hydra, it makes me think that maybe we'll have U.S. agent, but maybe we only have him for a moment in the closing in this one episode, and maybe, and I'm gonna go off the deep end on this, but I'm gonna try to go with it based on this cameo, is that he becomes Hydra Cap, because we do have an element, a recent run of the comics, I believe, if I recall correctly, where he is an agent with Hydra. So, that's something that they could do, because, you don't want to do it with Steve, because, for obvious reasons with what happened in Endgame. But even if they somehow de-age him, he is the example. He is the pristine example. So they don't want to tarnish that image. So they're going to try to use a doppelganger maybe to do that, when, like, in the comics it was Steve. So, like, it'll be interesting if they decide to go that route, where perhaps, like I said in this last episode, because he's taking things into his own hands, he becomes U.S. agent. I thought they would want to stay with that, but maybe because of Val's appearance, they may turn that on its head and make him Hydra Cap, perhaps.
And based on what you just said, I like that. If in the comics he already was a super soldier before he was Captain America, I like the way they handled it here, where he took the serum because he felt unworthy. He felt like he couldn't do the job, and so it was a it was a more desperate thing for him than just sort of taking on the mantle. Like he knew he wasn't up to it, and so I think that makes it a stronger character choice for him.
Definitely. And I was going to say, on the other end of that, because most people have rolled their eyes when I brought up this theory, but you guys, a lot of you will be eating your words if this ends up being true. So with what's been happening with Bucky, and thinking about, because we were talking about Torres taking on a role with Sam, and from the beginning, as soon as they introduced Torres in that first episode, I was like, oh, okay, if this is where they're going, like, what's going to happen with Bucky? Like, where is he going to have to go, or who can he be? Because, like, he may not have that role with Sam anymore. And they've been planting it and seeding it throughout this entire series of continuously calling him White Wolf. And for those of you that from Black Panther, again, acting in the spirit of that character and not following it to a T, one could argue that you could make Bucky White Wolf. And just as they've been doing in a lot of the solo Marvel films, where they have provided the title character with a secondary Avenger to assist them or to help out when they have to face against an antagonist that requires two of them. I think that's what they may do with the Black Panther sequel. They may very well bring him into the fray and have him come in as White Wolf. And the only reason why I say that, and you guys can check out the other episodes, I won't go into every single detail on what that is, but Sparknotes version is, I feel like that IO relationship is far deeper than they're applying, and they may do something with that. He needs another moniker to be able to kind of release himself, because I know you were talking about that in the Psych Evals, release himself from the baggage and the tarnishment of being Winter Soldier. So what better way of doing that by taking on a new moniker to kind of like reestablish himself as someone else? And then too, like by doing that, it also assists with what they're doing with Black Panther, because I know at this point it's been going back and forth. I know they're not. At one point they said they weren't going to recast for the film, and now there are talks that they are going to recast. So
Okay.
a lot of times, as I said, what they've been doing with Phase 3, and I feel they're going to continue to do going forward, whether it's in their TV shows or on their movies, is they're not going to have, even if they have solo adventures, they're not going to ever have characters be by themselves, because I think that they're going under the Marvel that is going under the idea that, okay, like, we can't do Avengers movies all the time, but we can make each of these solo films mini Avengers movies. So, like, we're seeing it with Spider-Man 3. I mean, Doctor Strange is going to be in Spider-Man 3. We're going to see it in Doctor Strange. Wanda is going to be in Doctor Strange. So, like, I feel like that trend is going to continue, where they are ever so subtly giving us the hint without us even knowing it, that that's where Bucky could be going. But what do you think about that? And maybe there's something else, that sparked another idea for you on what may be happening.
No, I did like the earlier on when he said, "No, I'm the White Wolf," and Sam's like, "What?"
Right. He's like, spend a couple of years in Wakanda, and all of a sudden you're White Panther. He's like, "No, I'm White Wolf." So,
yeah,
that is what he is.
But the I agree. I think it seems like Bucky just wants to step away and only kind of help out when he's needed. He doesn't want to be an Avenger. He doesn't want to. He just wants to kind of find his peace. He's been fighting for 100 years. Or 70 years.
And he's at peace in Wakanda. Right.
So
he said it himself.
And I do want to say that at the end of episode 3, when he started seeing those little pieces of Wakandan tech, there was a part of me that was like, is it possible that Chadwick might have shot one more scene or one more secret scene?
Right.
So
yeah.
I was really kind of like, could this happen? And it, obviously it wasn't. And she's great, and I love what they're doing with their history. And but it was just sort of like that. Is it possible that they kept this as a final tribute to him? But
for sure. And I was going to say, the only other thing with Io is, because if we in thinking of like him being alone, him being alone, and it being addressed when he's sitting down with that psychiatrist, like he needs to find a way to reroute himself into the world. So, perhaps they'll do that with him finding someone. So I don't know. But I guess the only other theory that I have, hopefully, fingers crossed, we finally find out who the power broker is. My theory, which again, I'm not going to go into detail on, you guys can track back to the other episodes, but I believe that it is Ross, General Ross, because he is trying to recruit people for his own team, known as the Thunderbolts, which many of those players are currently either on the show or in Marvel movies that are yet to come, that are on the way. So that makes me think that, okay, they're setting the stage or placing down the chess pieces for this team to be formed. So hopefully we get an indication of that. Like I said, in this episode we did have that button scene with Walker creating his own shield, which, as I said, plays to that U.S. agent thing. But hopefully we get something like that in the final episode. But what are your thoughts or hopes for the last episode?
Was there a button on this episode?
There was. Yes, I
missed it.
Yes,
I have to go back.
Oh man. So yes, it was. We had a scene where Walker is actually making his own shield, and he's putting his award, his one of his medals on the shield. So I'm like, oh, okay. So this is kind of their way of saying, saying that he is a U.S. agent, of
Okay.
him, really doubling down on being this figure, because the only reason why I came up with I was going to say the prior theory about Hydra is throughout this episode he constantly says, "I am Captain America," like he can't let go of that title. And so maybe that's how they get that to change to possibly Hydra Cap when he gets apprehended or imprisoned or whatever. But we will see, indeed. I guess my only go ahead.
Obviously, we're setting up for a showdown in New York.
Yes,
because that's where the Flag Smashers are. That's where Bucky is theoretically making amends with the gentleman that we saw in episode 1, whose son he killed.
Yeah. Yes.
Sam's on his way there. I'm guessing Agent Carter's on her way there, or Sharon's on her way there, or will be called in. So I think we're going to have all of our pieces kind of converge on New York, and I mean, I assume that she's going to end up getting back into the good side of the world instead of underground art dealing. She'll somehow be working with like the handler for Cap or something like that through and would she be part of Sword that was introduced?
Maybe because they did say Cap in the first episode. Taurus referenced like that rumor that Captain America was on the moon somewhere, so maybe that's their way of saying that he is now stationed on Sword, which, I mean, it works because like he's still involved in affairs, but he's off world. But you can still keep an eye on things that are happening.
Meaning Steve Rogers.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, he was old, but he wasn't dead. So.
Right. And then, I mean, if Isaiah is anything to go by, like he can still fight even if he's old, because he's stronger than even a person his age should be. So
yeah.
So yeah, hopefully we get we get a payoff of that as well. I know one thing, like just in talking about just final thoughts about like the episode. I know you were talking about before of certain episodes, like you liking that the MCU is becoming, I always say, like, use the word more woke, but just that idea that they are really digging deep and not shying away from certain topics or issues. Episode 2, like for me, was the weakest because it felt like it was so blatant and like over the head of the issue that they were trying to spell out. I felt like this past issue did a better job of that, of just like discussing that history versus having it like so obvious in that way. Like I appreciate the effort to do that. Don't get me wrong, but the way it was executed in this episode, I preferred to the way it was executed in 2 with the police officers. But I will say this one thing that I hope, and this is a nitpick thing with this series, is what they've done with Bucky. And the only reason why I say that is up to this point, Bucky has been like this elusive, like legendary assassin, and they hyped him up in Winter Soldier, and he was hyped up in Civil War, of being like this renegade character of who he would side with. And I don't like this as a trope in general, where you have a bad character become a good character, because and you've probably seen this a million times, but just that idea that once they become good, they for some reason become like, I don't want to say weaker, but they're not as capable. So like, when they're a bad guy, they have to be more powerful. I get it, because they have to be an obstacle. They have to be formidable. But I don't like it when you have that trope of a good guy becoming a bad guy becoming a good guy, and all of a sudden they're not as formidable as they were to be when they were bad. And
they're not willing to do the things to just waste somebody who's in the way, as opposed to putting them down and incapacitating them. Like the code.
I was gonna say, No, I get that, and I get that argument, but my argument is this: even if that's the case, they should still you can still you can still illustrate them as formidable even when they're pulling their punches. Because we actually talked about this last week when and this is hat tip to Emily, who was one of the guests last week, and she was talking about, I like how Captain America has a certain fighting style and he's way more fluid and it's more of a dance that he has in terms of the way he fights versus Walker. And I was like, yeah, of course, similar to your argument, like, of course he's that way because he's more of a defender and he has to find other methods to incapacitate people versus killing them. So by virtue of that, it looks like a dance because he's, trying to find ways to take people out without, being straight to the point and killing them. So, I mean, I get that argument, but at the same time, I don't like it. You can still do that without having the character, get beaten just to show how powerful another character is. Because it's happened in other instances and other media that I've seen. Like, I'll go all the way down to childhood and say Power Rangers. Like, I will say that because I remember when the Green Ranger, like, he was evil to begin with, and when he wasn't evil anymore, like, he became like useless and a paperweight basically as a character until he became the White Ranger. I remember that. Let me see another instance, and many Trekkies out here will appreciate this with Worf. Like, Worf is a formidable person, but many Trekkies hate the idea that whenever they bring on like a guest character or someone else who's supposed to be powerful, the first person they take out or they beat up is like Worf, because they have to show, oh man, they beat up Worf, so they must be really like, right, a force to be reckoned with. So like, I guess in that sense, I don't like that idea of kind of belittling another character for the sake of elevating, other characters. Because I mean, we could argue that they did this also with Hulk. Like, Hulk is like, just as his nickname is, the strongest there is. And they've basically, in the last couple of movies, which is another, like I said, minor gripe when it comes to MCU, they have punked him for the last couple of movies in terms of how they've, done him. So like, hopefully he gets some redemption. Hopefully they make him Maestro, but like, we'll see in terms of him becoming that potential villain, or they do something to redeem it. But I hope, just like what we saw with Hulk, that they don't do the same thing with Winter Soldier. I hope they redeem him somehow, because like, up to this point, it seems like that's the way they're going. And I do not like that trope at all. It irritates me to no end.
No, what I will say though is you got Zemo who for the purposes of Ultron was a bad guy, but
yes,
in Zemo's mind, he's not a bad guy. He's correcting an injustice of these superheroes and his whole thing about that's the path to supremacy and so those are the best kind of bad guys for me, because they're the ones that believe they're right and the ones that believe that's what made Thanos so good, was that he believed he was doing good, that he was just in his cause. But they've taken, and Daniel Bruhl is a great actor. But they've really just given him this. He's having a blast with his role. I mean, he is there's so much to it. He's bringing so much charisma and just a lot more to the character than what we got out of it in Civil War.
And he's definitely satisfying a fantasy that he had with that character, because I believe I read, and I'm trying to remember what article it was, but he had stated and when they were promoting this series that he wanted to wear the mask in Civil War, but they wouldn't allow him to get that far into that character. So he was excited to do this series because he finally got to delve into, that character that we've come to know in the comics versus, a proto version of what he is before being that character.
Right.
So yeah, for sure. But close it off there, Dan. Thank you so much for hopping on and talking about this episode of Falcon the Winter Soldier. Before I let you go, can you tell folks where they can find you?
Sure. I'm on Twitter at Dan Franko, Franko with a K, not like James and Dave with a C. And the recursion theorem is available on YouTube. And the comedy of horrors is just now hitting the the film festival circuit, so it's not available to view yet. But I think we have some news coming about I don't think we can release it yet, but there's another big festival that we have coming up. So stay tuned. You can find a comedy of horrors on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's actually a comedy of horrors volume 1. So hopefully there'll be a volume 2 at some point.
All right, awesome. Well, there you guys have it. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Debrief'D, the Falcon and Winter Soldier chat. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find us on Twitter, of course, which I already said, Moving Shaking and LTD, Instagram, Movers Shakers Unlimited, and of course, me, Brandon Choi ENT on Twitter, and Brandon Choi _ENT on Instagram. Thanks so much for watching this morning. Be safe out there, and I'll see you soon. Bye.